Learning the stretch and fold technique for wet dough. It was an eye-opening experience for me to learn this technique, and I find it very helpful when you're dealing with and manipulating a bread dough that requires more hydration than not. Common wet doughs that may use the stretch and fold technique: baguette, ciabatta, sourdough, and pizza. For this, what I have learned, and seems to work very well for me, is that you need a bowl next to you in which you have water and a scraping utensil where you can stretch and fold or just use your hands. I found my hands to work very well for this. Put water on your surface. We really don't want our dough to stick. Put water on your hands. I've been dipping my hands in the water here. Actually, the dough comes out pretty easily. And since my hands are wet, notice that the dough doesn't stick. Pretty nice. So the reason why we want to put water instead of flour when we're stretching and folding is that water keeps the dough hydrated, bubbly, and keeps the dough from sticking, as you can tell. Our stretch and fold technique includes 1.5 hours total, broken down into 5 parts. A 2-minute set, 45-minute rest, 2-minute set, 45-minute rest, final 2-minute set. So our first set of stretch and fold techniques will be for 2 minutes. I'm going to use a timer, but first I'm going to show you what that stretch and fold looks like, and then we'll do the real one. Stretch and fold detailed explanation. So we're going to wet our hands well, and I don't know if I'm going to need my pastry tool here, but we will see. And what you do is when you stretch and fold, this is what it looks like, but I found just more of a patting out works best for me, is that a lot of chefs, what they'll do is they take their pastry utensil here, they'll stretch it out, stretch the dough out, and then you fold it over. So you fold over one side, and notice we don't have much of a stick going on because our utensil is wet, right? So then you go to the other side, you take the utensil, you stretch your dough out, and then you fold it over. So you're sort of making like a letter, so to speak. And we're gonna do the same for the top and the bottom. So you're gonna take your dough, you're gonna stretch it using your tool up and over. So notice that we are a little more than about the halfway mark here. And then you're going to take the other side, I'm gonna flip it over there, turn it around. We're gonna stretch it out and then fold it over again. Okay, notice we've no sticking. It's just a kind of a wet, gooey mess. All right, so now our seam is at the top. We're gonna do 2 minutes of this. So I showed you as an example, now we're gonna do the 2 full minutes. We need to set the timer because we don't want to overwork this dough. Part 1, the first 2-minute stretch and fold set. So I already have 2 minutes on the clock. Okay, I'm starting my 2 minutes now. If you don't have a dough scraper, simply use your hands like this. So we're going to stretch, and you could use your hands too. I find hands work better for me than the tool. I'm gonna stretch it up, turn it over, stretch my dough, and then flip it over. And you're gonna do the same for both sides. We're gonna stretch and flip it over. I'm gonna stretch it and flip it over. Sometimes I find my hand tools much easier than other tools. All right, and I like to press mine out. That seems to be working. I'm getting a little bit of a stick, so I'm gonna add some more water. And it does look like a gooey mess, but it's okay because we want that hydration. All right, so that was the timer. I'm gonna stop here. I don't wanna stretch it anymore, and I don't wanna fold it anymore. So right now I've got the seam side up. We're gonna put the dough back into the bowl where I originally mixed everything together. So I'm gonna flip the dough where the seam is side down. Okay, so now seam sides down. And notice it's already starting to look like a dough. It's sticky dough, but still a nice full dough without it being kind of that rough, shaggy mess we had at the beginning. So the stretching and folding, it doesn't take much and it really does work. Now we need to let the dough rest for 45 minutes. So this is the first 45 minutes of our hour and a half. Part 2, our first 45-minute rest. We're going to cover the bowl and the dough, and we're just going to leave it on the counter. It doesn't need to go in the fridge. We don't even need to put it anywhere where it can get some heat. It's just fine sitting on the counter at room temperature. So we're going to let this set for 45 minutes. I'm going to start the timer because I want to make sure my times are accurate for this portion of the baking. And then we'll come back and we'll do another 2-minute set of stretching and folding. So see you in 45. Part 3. Our second 2-minute stretch and fold set. So we're ready for our second set of 2-minute stretch and fold. So go ahead and wet your board like we did before. It's all right if you splatter water everywhere. Notice our dough has, as it's been sitting, it's actually gotten a little bit of a rise to it. In fact, you can start to see some bubbles. That's what we want, right? All right, so we're going to carefully remove it from the bowl. Again, my hands are wet, so they won't stick to the dough. Okay, our timer is set for 2 minutes. I want to make sure that we get plenty of liquid on our utensil here. This is where we're going to stop. So let's put it back into our bowl here, seam side down. Okay, so our dough is back in the bowl. We want to do exactly what we did the last time. We're going to cover the dough and bowl up with a towel. We're going to let it sit here and we're going to set the timer for another 45 minutes. Then we have our last 2-minute stretch and fold, and in the fridge it goes overnight. Almost there. Part 4, our second 45-minute rest. So we're ready for our third and final 2-minute stretch and fold. So go ahead and uncover your bowl. Let's take a look how much that dough has risen for the last 45 minutes. It's pretty good. I can see some air bubbles too. Oh, a little sticky. My hands aren't wet though. Yeah, look at those air bubbles. Yes. Okay, last set here. Okay, as before, we want to make sure that we put water on our hands. Let's get some water on our board. And nice, we're gonna pull this dough away, and oh, I can just see the bubbles forming. Lots of little bubbles popping throughout here. All right, that's beautiful looking dough. As before, we wanna stretch and fold. So we're gonna do this for 2 minutes. So go ahead and set your timer. Part 5, our final 2-minute stretch and fold set. So our dough has had its last set of stretch and fold. So we're gonna put it back into the bowl that we stirred it in the beginning. And so I've got the seam on the bottom. So I'm gonna put it in the bowl. It's just a nice wet dough. It's very hydrated at the moment. We're gonna cover it with plastic wrap and let it sit in the fridge overnight. So this dough will be okay if it sits for anywhere from 12 to 20 hours. The last time I made these, mine sat in their fridge for about 20 hours and it still was produced a perfect baguette. So the dough will rise, but don't worry if it touches the top of the plastic, and it's not gonna actually ooze out. I haven't had that happen yet. But the plastic will keep it contained, which is why I wanted to use plastic instead of a towel here. And then there you are. It's gonna go in the fridge, and I will see you tomorrow.